I am live. Today is Friday. It's the 6th of October 2023. And we've had sunshine and clouds and sunshine and clouds. And anyway, I am reading out of Eyes of Horus. It is a book by Joan Marshall Grants. She was a writer of her own far memories. This memory is where she is a male. She is Ra-up, and she lives in the Nomark of the Oryx, or he lives. We are now in the 6th part of this, and it's the first chapter of part 6, and it's entitled Torch-Bearer. This plays 3,500 years BC in Egypt. 4 months had passed. The preparations had been completed. Each man and woman was ready for the role they would have to play, and everywhere watchers were waiting for the word to go forth, the word which would herald the rebirth of Egypt. There were those within the royal palace who were sworn to the cause of Amenemhet, and so news of the slowly declining strength of Pharaoh reached us every few days. Amenemhet had twice been to the north since he had been with us in the Oryx, and was now there again, receiving tribute at the summer palace in the royal nome. That he should be in the royal city, or if not there, in the south, when Pharaoh died, seemed essential to the smooth working of our plans, so we were always anxious when he had to go to the north. In another 12 days, he would be back at the royal city, and as only yesterday a report to Royden had said that Pharaoh seemed stronger than he had been for some time, and the royal physician had declared that it was probable his master would linger into the new year, it seemed likely that the hour of the horizon would not come until Mary was no longer prisoner of our son. It was with relief that I told her this news, for as the time of the birth grew nearer, she had become increasingly anxious that it might prevent her being able to come with me if the Oryx marched against Menhet. It was now the 3rd month of the sowing, and the heat was not intense even at midday. During the morning we had been watching the scribes completing the fresco on the walls of the nurseries. It was a frieze of animals belonging to the south. First an oryx, followed by a hare, a jackal, a tortoise, a leopard, a gazelle, and the other standards of the 10 gnomes of the south. Excuse me. First an oryx, followed by a hare, a jackal, a tortoise, a leopard, a gazelle, and the other standards of the 10 gnomes of the south, the oryx leading the rest into a river meadow, where grew the plants and fruits of our country. After we had talked to the scribes for a little while, I sent for our double litter and for a runner to tell the sailing master to have ready the smallest of our boats, the one we used when we wished to be alone without a crew. The airs were light, and we drifted downstream until we found a place where trees grew down to the water's edge and I could tie up in the shade. Mary, who had been drowsing in the bottom of the boat, yawned and said contentedly, "When we are alone like this, it is difficult to remember that the hour still belongs with tomorrow's instead of yesterday's. I've grown so used to living among happy people that the fear and cruelty, which are the background of the royal gnome, seem unreal as a nightmare, a dark dream which I am no longer dreaming. A dream does not cease to exist just because you are no longer dreaming it, any more than a dream becomes a reality just because you believe it." She sighed. "I know, but sometimes I wish we could live within the Oryx and forget the rest of Egypt. Father used to think that would be possible until Royden made him realize that to see oppression and be content to turn away, making the excuse that it is beyond your immediate authority, it is not your concern, would be like a fish in a trap. which tried to pretend the wicker basket was the cave it had chosen and not a prison, and that as long as it could forget the rest of the river, the fishermen would never come. If the watchers allowed power to remain in the wrong hands, we might continue to enjoy the peace of the oryx for a few years, perhaps only for a few months, but eventually our indifference would return, just as swallows return, and they would have grown new feathers on their journey, grey as fear and black as a statue of Set. I know that too, Rahab. Egypt, as you once told me, or did I tell you? I forget. Egypt is like a human body. No part of it can know real tranquility if another part of it is in pain. The tone of her voice made me wonder if she herself was in pain, and I said anxiously, "You said you think he'll be born in about 20 days from now. Are you sure it won't be sooner than that?" "No, he's not ready yet." She curved a long, slender hand around her belly. "Oh, Ram, I do wish women didn't have to become such silly shapes. The rest of me is the same as it always was, but the curve of my belly would match a sickle. I wish having a baby didn't take so long. I wish it didn't make me feel clumsy. Do you wish you weren't having it?" "No, I never wish that, especially now he's so nearly finished. I dreamt of him last night. Not a very clear dream, or I would have remembered to tell you about it before. It was as he used to be, not as he is now. You were in the dream too, and I think we were all women. The country we lived in then looked rather like Egypt, but not part of it, as I have been to. I know he's going to be someone who is a friend of ours. I wonder if we shall recognize him as soon as he's born. It will be funny seeing someone we know well, someone who perhaps used to be older and stronger than we were, suddenly wrapped up in a little body that can't even walk or make intelligible words. It will be very exciting when he can tell us what he is thinking about, especially if he can remember being with us before. He should be grateful for all the bother you're going through for him." "No, he shouldn't," said Mary decisively. "That is the one thing no mother should ever expect from her child, gratitude for the trouble of bearing it. It is the mother who should be grateful or apologetic, and do everything she can to help her child to find sufficient wisdom for it not to be a waste of its time being born as a child. I wonder if a child knows whether its parents want it. In spite of the women's secret, there must be many women who have children unexpectedly." "Of course it does. If our son was unwanted, he would feel as we should do if we were suddenly banished to live among hostile foreigners. Even if the foreigners tried to be kind to us, we should probably hate them, even though, because we were hopelessly outnumbered, we should have to conceal our feelings under a pretense of gratitude or even of affection. When I was very small, I used to have a dream of walking through a meadow, picking white flowers and singing to myself because I was happy. Suddenly, a great vulture swooped down and carried me off in its talons. Black clouds covered the sky, and there was nothing but an awful roaring of wind. The vulture took me into a cave, narrow and dark, and then it turned into a black moth, which wrapped me around and around in a kind of cocoon. That part of the dream wasn't very pleasant, for quite often I dreamt myself back in the meadow, but I always woke up from there to find myself a prisoner who must struggle to get free. Then the bird came back and took me out of the cave. Again I heard the wind roaring, and talons dug into my head and shoulders and hurt me. Then it dropped me, and there was a terrible feeling of falling which went on for a long time. I seemed to be tangled up in the cocoon again, and there were faces looking down at me, faces of strangers I had never seen before. They leaned over me, and their eyes looked as big and stupid as white stones. I screamed at them to go away, screamed for someone to come to set me free. They didn't understand what I was talking about, for they were all foreigners who spoke a different language. There was no one there to whom I was linked with love. If there had been, they would have understood, for the link would have carried thoughts between us. When I was older, my nurse told me I was a very naughty baby because I cried so much. I suppose she had forgotten what it was like to be a prisoner among strangers. For almost the first time since I had been with Mary, I was resentful of the barrier imposed by time. I wanted to have been there when she was born, to take her away from those stupid, unthinking people and bring her up in the love which should be the natural protection of every child. No child could feel itself a stranger, I said, if it is born to parents who love each other as we do. I don't expect our son will mind being born. He won't mind because he isn't a stranger. A child born to people with our degree of affinity never is. That's why, if no one except people like us had children, being born wouldn't be called going into exile. That's another thing we must teach our people, Ra'ab, that children should always be born of love and never for expediency. That evening, those who welcomed Ra to his home after his day's journey, carried banners of flame and coral red. Pennants of cloud streamed up from the west, until, with the rising of the north wind, the last fires of sunset were quenched in the wine-dark sky. The sail curved out as though it tried to reflect the curve of the new moon. Mary leaned back against my knee as I sat at the steering oar. The water was smooth and cool as black linen, and the whisper of the boat against the current was gentle as the wings of a night bird in the stillness. As we rounded the last bend of the river, the boat lay over a little to meet the wind. The moon was brighter now, and I could see the shape of the trees beyond the landing stage. I saw a torch moving along the path to the water steps, and idly wondered if someone was going down to spare fish. A man stood waiting for us to come in, the torch held high above his head. As he leaned forward, trying to see into the darkness, I shouted to him, and he waved the torch 3 times, a signal agreed on by the watchers. It meant, Pharaoh is dead, the hour of the horizon is come. It seemed as though the Ra'ab, who was travelling to Hotep Ra as fast as relays of runners could carry him, was not one man, but 2. The lover, for the first time parted from his wife, her kisses still warm on his lips, her voice still so much more real than the padding feet of the litter bearers, who were carrying him so swiftly away from her. The captain, eager to prove his powers of leadership, thankful that the hour for which he had trained for 7 years was now at hand. Mary had stood at the gate to watch me go, looking so small and valiant in the flickering light of the torch held by the gatekeeper. Her farewell had been, remember, Ra'ab, that my heart and all of me that is real goes with you. It is only my body which must stay here, and until you return, it will be no more a part of me than the kilts which will stay folded in the cedar chest until your homecoming. Right. I finished this chapter here. Bye.